This week we're looking at evaluation research and problem analysis. Evaluation research isn't necessarily a very specific methodology that's secondary to trying to find out if our set of interventions are working for a particular program. A lot of times it's not published research, it's research used within a program to see if it is successful and to see if we can make it better. So we want to see if a result has been produced within that program that benefits our clientele. Problem analysis is designed to help public officials determine a future course of action. For example, is locking people up in jails better than drug courts and mental health courts and things like that? What's going to reduce recidivism more? The policy process definitely is something that is extremely important, and it oftentimes goes with the times. For example, in the 1980s, the war on drugs, the get tough on crime types of, the three strikes and you're out types of laws came about. We got really good at incarcerating people. We got crime off the streets, but that created another problem. We found that the more people that are incarcerated, a lot of times the people who are incarcerated have mental illnesses, like we were talking about the mental health courts, and have drug problems, like we were talking about the drug courts. And as a solution to those things, we look at, what are some alternative methods that we can use, because our incarceration, we're good at getting people off the streets, but it's not helping that recidivism thing. So now criminal justice has looked at more and more research, and more policies have changed because of that research, and now we're doing a lot of evaluation research on those specific programs. So we're looking at the policy level. Are the policies being implemented the way they're intended to be implemented? Is there fidelity to the research? The research, in many cases, we have evidence-based practices where there's so much research that it's practically proven. We don't like to use the word proven necessarily in research unless you're working in a hard science where it's a litmus type of thing, where social science is more of a soft science, but basically evidence-based practices are as close as we're going to prove something in social research. And so these evidence-based practices have elements of them that are research-based. For example, drug courts have 10 proven elements that make a drug court successful. And if you're not using those 10 elements, you're likely not having as successful of a drug court as possible. And whatever it is, whether you're using a risk needs assessment or something like that, where are we implementing it as planned, and are we achieving our intended goals? And if we're not, we need to go back to are we implementing it correctly? So looking at our policy's goals is the first step of doing evaluation research. An evaluability assessment is a pre-evaluation. There are things that we look at to predetermine are these prerequisites met to be able to reach these policy goals. For example, is there support from relevant organizations? What goals are there, and how are they translated into program components? What kinds of records or data are available? And who has the direct or indirect stake in the program? My policy is that I want to reduce recidivism by 45%. Well, let's say you have a program, that's your program goal. That was a very definable and operational definition that has a measurement, reducing crime by 45%. Or reduce recidivism by 45% or whatever I said, but there's different stakeholders in that, where if you're an offender, you want to stay out of jail, you want to stay out of prison, you want to stay off probation, you want to reunite with your families a lot of times, you want to stay away from using friends. So that's their goal within this. The goal of criminal justice professionals might be we want to reduce recidivism, we want to protect the public, we want to improve the lives of the offenders. But they're different goals, kind of similar in a way. But then there's also other stakeholders. There's politicians, there's program administrators that might have to be a little more concerned about the finances of things. So everybody has a little bit different angle at which they're looking at this, but when you take a 360-degree angle of the program's objectives, we need to clearly, identify each stakeholder in that and clearly identify the outcomes that we want. And a lot of times we'll find common purpose, which allows for a lot better buy-in from all the different parties when we're implementing some of these strategies. For example, going back to the drug courts are keeping people out of prison and in jail. So that's a win-win. That's a win for the public because it's less taxpayer money, people are with their families, but it's also a win for the offenders because they're staying out of prison. And a lot of times they're getting their felonies dropped if they successfully complete the program. So there's a lot of good to that. Just because evaluation research isn't typically methodologically sound as compared to clinical research designs, but the more elements we use of a good research design, the better our outcomes, or not outcomes, but the better our research, the more validity and reliability and things like that our research are going to have. And we can start, the better research we have, the more generalizability typically we'll have if we have a random sample, and treatment integrity, meaning that if there's 5-6 people doing a treatment, that these 5-6 people are doing it a different way, not just because these 3 people are really, really good at it and these 2 people are really bad at it. We want everybody doing it approximately the same way and in line with the fidelity and integrity of whatever treatment method in which they're using. When we're doing experimental designs within evaluation research, we want to really make sure that the staff people that are assigned to the control and randomization and the active treatment groups are in fact separating those. So if you're doing a cognitive behavior or cog skills type of treatment, you need to make sure that the people that are doing the placebo type of group, which might be just kind of a supportive group, but not a cog skills group, make sure that they're not doing cog skills, make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do, even though it might not be helping them as much as the cog skills group. If you remember, quasi-experimental designs you're not taking that random sample, you're taking groups of people and placing them in, and you're picking which people are going into which group. But what you have to keep in mind is to try to make those 2 groups as similar as possible in terms of their demographics and other variables that are important to the treatment or the effect that they're getting to see if that's improving or not. Problem analysis, remember, is what policy makers use to determine what policies and course of action that they would like to do. So the evaluators within these types of research oftentimes literally make how-to guides for policing and reducing crime and crime analysis. What is the problem and how are you going to respond to it? For example, how are you going to respond to mentally ill offenders? How are you going to respond to homeless? How are you going to respond to somebody who's being violent? How are you going to respond to this, that, and the other thing? Remember that there's 2 sides to every story. All research has their limitations, and applied research is definitely no exception to that. There are oftentimes political reasons, whether from politicians or the public or administrators or people that are working within the system, that or individuals who have been incarcerated or in the criminal justice system. A lot of times they have their own personal agendas that oftentimes, we call it emotional reasoning in mental health, where we're no longer objective, or we think we're, even worse, we think we're objective, we think we're being completely rational about something, but our emotions are causing us to look past, to have that tunnel vision and not see the total context. So we really need to know who our stakeholders are in this, and we need to know what perspectives their perspectives are. We need to know what their biases are. We need to know If they have some ulterior motives on why they might be pushing something so hard. Is there a financial reason? Is there political reasons? And we need to educate the different stakeholders on why objective evaluation should be conducted. We need to be able to apply this research, to use it to determine what works, what doesn't. We can't just allow things to just take their course without research. Research is the reason why the world has come so far in so few of years. I mean, the world is 3.5 billion years old, and we have made so many strides since the industrialization era in the 1800s, 1900s, now the 2000s, and every year there's so much more stuff that we're learning and getting in these gadgets, and it's all based on research. So we really need to remember that human services, criminal justice, psychology, what we call the soft sciences, research is so important because we can do a lot of things that will hurt or benefit the people in which we're serving. And research is going to be the way in which we find out, is it helping or hurting? And a lot of times you can have a ton of research. For example, the global warming thing. I don't want to make this a political issue. Just an example that 99% or so, I was just at Harvard not too long ago, and I went through a museum and it said 98 or 99% of scientists believe that global warming is really happening. And it is a major issue. But there's that 2% of people, and then it's become a political issue where many people believe that global warming isn't happening, even though 98% of the population is, or the scientific population is saying it's happening. So we need to put that into, people need to look at it objectively. And just like getting back to the social science research, if somebody says everybody in prison should have a bunny, because that reduces recidivism by 75%, you're going to think, okay, where did you get that data? Well, maybe it's from somebody who owns a bunny farm, and they're going to want you to buy their bunnies from them. Well, they have a reason to manipulate the numbers. But, but you might think that's a total ludicrous statement. But let's say some researchers went in there that were very objective, and they were able to see the full picture, and they found out, yeah, let's replicate that study and find out if this is truly something that's happening, and reduces recidivism by that much, and it might, and that might be something that we do. That's completely made up, by the way, so don't start suggesting that to your sheriff that everybody in jail gets a bunny. But we have to look at research, and we have to make sure that research is valid and not biased.